Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. Gene Panasanka here on Straight and Unfiltered. It's a beautiful day in New York, and we have an outstanding, truly remarkable guest today. It is truly my pleasure and honor to introduce to you our guest who spent 30 years on active duty as a U.S. Navy SEAL, teams 3, 5, and 7. He completed nine overseas deployments, protecting the interests of the U.S. all across the world, including but not limited to Somalia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He is a recipient of a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart and 5 Combat Action Ribbons. He's a Command Master Chief Jason Gardner. Welcome to the channel, sir.
Thank you, Gene.
My pleasure indeed, sir. And again, it's truly an honor having somebody of your caliber on this channel. I've been following you across the board on Instagram, on YouTube for quite some time after you came back in the civilian world from your 3 decades of dedicated and distinguished service to the United States. So again, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank your family, who obviously has been paying their tribute and taking their toll on their end for having their husband and father, deployed for so many years and decades all over the world, again, serving this great nation. Again, there are so many things we can talk about. I mean, your life fits, so many different wonderful things. But I would like you to start by just sharing with our audience your background. I mean, how you got involved in the military. Did you have any other considerations of getting any other business? So please take it away from here.
So I was 7 years old when I decided I was going in the military. And so that I was kind of lucky in that I made that decision about what my life path was going to be that earlier. And I was really torn because as young as I can remember, I loved the outdoors. And so I was torn between going into some kind of forestry or life science or something that would put me out in the woods or studying animals, because I love nature and I loved animals and being out in it. And my father was in the Marine Corps, and when I was 7, we were living on the air station in El Toro in California. And I remembered in a car ride, it was a rainy day, I was looking out the window and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go in the military first and then go after this other stuff, life science or something outdoors. That'll be the next stage in my life. And then for the longest time, I was going to join the Marines because that's what my dad did. And it wasn't because my dad was forcing it down my throat. I didn't have one of these great Santini situations where my dad was very militaristic, but that's just what I knew. And that was what I grew up around. And so that's what I was going to do. And then in junior high school and high school, I was taking a martial art called Kaji Kempo, and one of the instructors was a SEAL in Vietnam. And my parents, because I didn't know anything about SEALs, and I was like, what does that even mean? Does the Navy have a mammal program or something? And then my parents were all impressed by the fact that this one instructor was a SEAL, and he had this amazingly calm presence, like the guy could deal with everything, And I'm like, oh, okay. So I started doing some research, and then I decided this is what I want to do. So I talked to the Navy recruiter and I joined the Navy straight out of high school. And at the time they had a dive, I got my dog up here with me. They had a dive fair program, but it was closed. So I just took a gamble and came in the Navy in a source rating that would allow me to go to BUD/S, and then joined the Navy out of high school. So I enlisted in September of '87. And then I went to my boot camp and then A school, which was gunner's mate. And then after that, I went to BUD/S, which is Basic Underwater Demolition School. That's our selection course for SEAL training.
Right.
I like a 70% attrition rate. It's really difficult. And I graduated with started and graduated with class 155. And I think that was in December of '88, and then I checked into SEAL Team 5 in February '89. And that I just plan on doing one enlistment, and they just one turned into 2, turned into 3, turned into 4, I think, and then I went through divorce when I had 12 years in, and this is like the late 90s. So I separated and went into the reserves, and I did that prior to getting divorced. And the thing about
Right.
being gone all the time, when you're home all the time, it doesn't necessarily make your relationship better if it's flawed
So true,
already.
so true. That's a common thread, in the military, especially special operations community. Either it's Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Special Forces, Delta Force. It's very
Divorce
unfortunate
rates are pretty
reality,
high.
but it's just one of many, many, many testimonies to how much this nation, the people, of the U.S. should be appreciative of what yourself, your brethren, and everybody, down the line have been contributing, protecting the interests of the United States. I mean, personal toll is incredible. The divorce rate is just more than staggering, and it's a huge sacrifice in addition to, again, physical, mental sacrifices that you and your team members have been experiencing over years and decades. In your case, three decades. That's pretty incredible.
And anyway, so I'd gone in the reserves, and then when the divorce was final, I was like, I want to go back in the military. I went back in the military and then finished out my 30-year career. And at that point, when I went back in, I was like, okay, I'm in it for a career now. Up until then, I'd just been piecemealing deployments or enlistments together. But I'm glad you brought that up, because when people thank me for my service, which they do all the time, and we're really lucky in that the nation as a whole is very thankful for the servicemen and women. But I always tell people it's a privilege. It was a privilege to serve. And I had such a great experience, and I work with such great people. And the nation does a really good job these days of taking care of the servicemen and women. And sure, there are cracks in the system that people fall through, and there are things that we could do better. But as a whole, boy, it's a good deal. It's a really, really good deal. I know that when I talk with coalition partners, they can't do 20 years and get a retirement. Like, they got to do it till they're 65 years old to pull a retirement. And I'm talking about like the Brits and the Aussies and all of them. It's not as good a deal. I mean, we have got a screaming good deal in the military. Even today, even though they have a blended retirement now, and it's not a guaranteed benefit,
Right.
but it's still way better than anything else that's going on out there. And sure, there's some sacrifices that we've got to make. And we make them willingly, and it's a privilege that we're allowed to make them. And when you talk, another thing, when you talk about service, is I volunteered for this, right? I signed a contract and volunteered for it. And my wife knew what she was getting into when she married a SEAL. But when you talk about our kids, now they're the ones that are serving a lot, and in my mind, because they didn't have any choice in the matter. And so, the Christmases that I've missed and been lucky enough to actually have good internet service so I could watch them and be present Christmas morning and watch them open their presents and things like that via FaceTime or whatever it is, Skype. That's fantastic. It was a privilege to do the time that I did, and it's just a fantastic thing that we all have living in this great nation.
Amen to that, Jason. Indeed, I grew up in Ukraine when it was still part of the communist Soviet Union. Again, I'm not going to be going to politics and the evils of communism and Marxism and how many hundreds of millions of human lives have been physically destroyed. So every day, that since I came to the US about 30 years back, I wake up with the same thought, and I go through the day with million thoughts of the same nature, and I hit the bed, thanking and praying to God, thanking that I've been able to come to the US and contribute to this great country, not in the same capacity as yourself, but as a hardworking, business owner and taxpayer. I served in the military right before I came to the US. Again, I wish it was the U.S. military, but we don't get the choice of where we're born, where we get to grow up. but it is beyond me to see such a fundamental disconnect between so many people in this country which don't appreciate a fraction of what you, but by saying yourself, I mean the entire U.S. military, have been doing to really keep this country safe, keeping it going. I mean, they're absolutely living like in a bulb, in their own little worlds without understanding the evils that are out there. And you guys, you really fight those evils, keeping Americans safe. So again, I can't thank you enough for your contribution and your family members who went through, similar, though different, but very similar in their own ways, sacrifices, as far as not seeing the husband, not seeing the father, the birthdays, the Christmas, the Thanksgiving. God bless the internet, definitely. When I served, that was decades back. And forget about the internet. The Soviet military, they would not allow you a phone call, for 2 years of your deployments. And again, I was deployed outside of the country. When you think of the places where the Soviets used to be involved, so that's a different world, as I guess. But let's talk. So you completed the BUDS program, which by itself is one of the most, if not the most challenging and excruciating programs out there. I mean, I know some people who used to be great athletes and they failed it. They failed it miserably. So I would like you, Command Master Chief, to spend some time and just talk about the fact that this is not just physical abilities, but it's a lot more than mental abilities of the person that goes through that program, through that selection course, the BUDS, and the following, selection programs that allows you to really keep going. It's really your set of mind, it's your determination, it's your will to really overcome all those obstacles and make it through, because you have the goal that you're trying to achieve, regardless of physical and psychological hardship that you have to go through in the meantime.
Yeah, I would say that BUDS is probably, our selection course is probably 80% mental and 20% physical. And Grant, your body has got to be able to withstand the punishment and be able to recover the punishment that it's going from 6 months of training. And so that has to be there. But it's such a big aspect of it is mental. And time again, I would see, like when I went to BUDS, I had this horrible, I turned 19 in BUDS. And I just had the worst imposter syndrome because I still felt like a little kid. And
you're 19, you're still a teenager.
Yeah. And I was like maybe 150 pounds. I'm 5'6", so I'm not a big guy. And I'm looking at these guys that look like action figures, right? They're 6'2", 230 pounds, like 9% body fat. And you're like, oh my gosh, those are real men. I don't know that I'm going to be able to keep up. And then, and they could do all the physical stuff. They could do push-ups, they could do sit-ups, they could run all day long. And then they would just crack. They would crack and you'd see them bringing out and quitting. And you're like, oh, well, okay. It's the tenacity, first of all, and then you look at people that you're less than impressive physical stature, never complain, keep their heads down. They're just grinding it out every step of the way. And there's a huge life lesson in that. And just like, how you judge other people and how you judge yourself. And something I made a mental note a long time. It's just like, don't judge the book by the cover. You better figure out what's underneath all that, just because of those experiences. And I thought when I went to BUDS that we would be locked down for 6 months, and that's not the case. The case is like, you have an average work day, and at the end of the day, they turn you loose, and you can become your own worst enemy because you're not restricted to the base. You can just go out in town if you want to go out in town and burn it down and drink a bunch, but you better perform the next day. And I think that hammers a lot of folks because they're left to their own devices. And, the draw to quit, when you're laying in 53-degree water and they've got tables, they know how long they can keep you in that water without killing you.
Right.
And so they're keeping you in that till your suffering is just excruciating because you're so cold. And then you'll watch somebody quit and they'll they'll get the guy, like we're all getting the thing called surf torture, where we're all laying down in the surf with our backs facing the ocean. And so the waves are hitting us, but we don't know when they're going to hit us. And we're locked arms and we're in nothing but shorts or maybe even naked, and we're just jackhammering. And then someone will quit, and they'll bring him up in front of everybody, and they'll wrap a blanket around him and hand him a cup of hot cocoa and talk to him like, yeah, hey, you made a good call, because as miserable as you are there, when you get to the SEAL teams, you'll be 10 times as miserable. And that's true. In the SEAL teams, I've been 10 times the misery level that I ever was in BUD/S. But they start rationalizing it, and then 6 more guys will quit, and then you just have to grind it all out, and you have to shift your perspective. And it's an important perspective to have, in that you're looking for your end state and goal. And my end state and goal is to make it through training. But if you're focused on that goal, it'll be completely overwhelming, because it seems so huge that that'll just break you. So you get to the point where this is where I want to get. I want to get to that end state or goal. And then what I need to focus on is the next step. Let me just make it through that next step. And in BUD/S and some of the real hard portions of it, especially like in Hell Week, where you're up for a week straight. And by that, I mean, in a full week, Sunday night to Friday afternoon, you're going to get 3 to 4 hours sleep total, which is really just like 20 minutes here and 40 minutes there and stuff like that. So no sleep. And you're just, initially you're like, I'm just going to make it to the next meal. And you get to the next meal. And then there are portions where you're like, I'm just going to get my left foot in front of my right foot, and then my right foot and my left foot, and just focusing on that and focusing your deal. And that's a great life lesson. And it's a really good thing that we have that as a selection, because it helps everybody in the SEAL teams that they get that point of view. And it's like, okay, there's the end state or goal, but we just need to make it through this first thing. Now, even though that makes it through this selection, doesn't mean that every SEAL is an outstanding performer and doesn't have flaws in one way or another. But it's a great life lesson. It's a great life lesson, and it resonated heavily with me. And it's a lesson that I continually have to think about and relearn all the time, because my process of improving as a human being and being a better person is never going to stop.
Well, amen to that. And again, your career, Master Chief, is a true testimony to that. I know that you have multiple qualifications as a result of your, many year-long training and service in the military. Sniper, sniper instructor, SEALs instructor, is just to name a few. So, what you had to go through really prepared you to the real service once you have been deployed with the teams. And I would like you, without going into any specifics, that could jeopardize in any shape and form any of the service people still deployed out there, just to speak about a couple of examples. I know that Ramadi, I guess, was one of the places where you and your team were deployed. And obviously, Ramadi in Iraq has seen some of the most vicious battles against, insurgents in Iraq, and then eventually ISIS. So if you could, I would just like you to spend some time and speak about those experiences.
Yeah, sure. And I think one of the best stories to tell you about is maybe tell you about one of my failures and a time that I became complacent. I got a little bit arrogant. I got what they call the disease of victory. And it almost cost me my life, and we were almost overrun. And that was an operation in Afghanistan. And this picture up behind me here is my SEAL task unit when I was the SEAL task unit senior enlisted advisor that went to Afghanistan in 2009. I was in Ramadi in 2005, and things were ramping up there, but nowhere near the scale of violence that we saw in Afghanistan. And we got in a firefight. It lasted like 3 to 4 minutes, and it was done. In Afghanistan, that deployment in 2009, our longest firefight was 4 days long. 4 days of grinding it out. That's insane. And so, and that was early in our deployment. The Green Berets had this operation that they put together where they were actually going into this town in Marja, and the city's name was Marja, and it's in the southern Helmand River Valley. It's completely surrounded by irrigation canals. And so essentially it's a moat around the whole town. So up until 2009, no coalition force had ever been inside of Marja. It was a Taliban city. They had complete freedom of movement there. And anytime anyone tried to get close, they would just blow the bridges coming over these canals, and you're not getting in. And then they just get shot out of there. So because they had complete freedom of movement, what the Taliban was doing was consolidating all the opium that they're growing all over the country, because they're, to a larger extent, funding the war with drug sales. So they'd harvest all this opium, grow them all over the country. And there's a lot of effort that goes into harvesting opium. It's a very labor intensive thing to do that. And then they were consolidating it all in Marja. And then from there, some of it would be converted or refined into heroin, and some of it wouldn't. And then it would be shipped down into Pakistan and then distributed throughout the world. Well, the Green Berets, the Special Forces guys, they had intel that this was a big consolidation point. And they tried a bunch of different strategies in the past. You know, one of them was just burning the opium fields, but that wasn't working. And it was really just punishing the farmer. And so the strategy that they were operating then was like, hey, let's let them go through all the effort of harvesting the opium, paying off the farmers, and then wait for them to make all the effort to consolidate it, and then we'll hit the consolidation points and destroy it. So obviously they've got their own city that coalition forces don't have access to. That was a big consolidation point. So it was actually a SF operation, but they needed extra numbers. And so we were like, hey, we want to come along too. So it wound up being like, I think a little bit over 100-man ground force. It was 2 Special Forces ODA teams from 7th Group and the OAB above them, and then 2 SEAL platoons, plus the task unit headset over the top, which was me. And we choppered in there in the middle of the night, and we held 4 square blocks for 4 days, and it was a nonstop firefight. We wound up destroying somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 pounds of opium. There was 800 pounds of refined heroin there that we destroyed, which is just a mind-boggling amount.
Hundreds of millions probably worth of drugs, right? That you guys have.
The estimate was over $100 million.
Incredible. Think about the volume of arms, you know, that they could spend that money on fighting the U.S. and the coalition forces with the proceeds of those sales. It's just incredible, staggering numbers, nothing less.
Right. And so it was like, and that was our 3rd or 4th operation in Afghanistan. And it was incredible. We were super lucky that the Green Berets, you know, had us come along and then work alongside of them, because they were awesome. And then, you know, we had Afghan commandos with us in that operation too. So it was good, but that was like the most sustained and intense fighting of my career up until that point. And then that deployment just stayed like that. Like 21 of our 23 operations, we got into firefights on that deployment. And as it happened, you know, every time we got in contact with the Taliban, we did the meat stomp on them. We had better weapons, we had better training, we had air support, we had night vision. And so towards the end of our deployment, we started to get complacent. I started to get complacent. You know, started to cut corners. I wasn't really thinking things through. We were calling the enemy savages, which means we weren't respecting them. And so an operation that we did later in the deployment, it's almost towards the end of our deployment. We were going into this Afghan village that was nestled in the mountains north of Kandahar to get this Taliban commander that 2 compounds on the edge of the village. And so the village is nestled up there in the mountains, and then there are these 2 compounds, and then there's a big like hill that's essentially the size of a 4-story building right behind the 2 compounds. So we go in, We get inserted via helicopter a ridge line away. Come up and over the mountains, down, take the 2 compounds, and then that we also take that piece of high ground right behind the compounds, which is, it's always a good idea to have some high ground because you can see out, you know. Your field of view is really limited from compounds because they got big walls around them and they're in amongst other compounds. So we grabbed that piece of high ground, and I was up on that piece of high ground right behind those compounds. You know, we immediately our assault found a huge cache of weapons and iridium sat phones, all kinds of nefarious stuff, multiple passports for the same person, a bunch of Taliban leadership we captured. And so we're holding that. Well, we're going to remain there over day. And so our standard operating procedure is every guy carried 10 empty sandbags so that you could build yourself, we could make ourselves fighting positions to withstand the firefight that would happen during the next day. Well, we're up on that piece of high ground, and we start trying to fill sandbags, and we get like 2 sandbags filled, but the whole hill that we're on is all rock, right? So you'd have more luck trying to fill up sandbags in the parking lot of a Trader Joe's than we were having up on that hill.
Right.
And it's something I should completely thought about before, because most of Afghanistan is just these big piles of rock everywhere. So we were forced to grab every boulder that we could, and we made ourselves this really kind of janky, half-ass fighting position up on that hilltop.
Right.
And that's what we did. So we got some high on me, and get that built. Sun comes up, all the women and children start leaving that village,
Right.
which is that's the indicator that there's going to be a fight.
Right.
But the Taliban, usually they'd come at us straight away. In this case, they didn't. They took their time. They figured out exactly which buildings we were at and then what high ground we were on. And then they started to push up to high ground all around us. And that's the thing about being fighting in the mountains, right? You grab one piece of high ground and folks can grab the other high ground around you. So they start pushing up to that other high ground around us and doing that. And so 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, still hasn't been a bullet fired. And it's starting to get hot up in these high ground positions. 10:30, we can see a guy on one of the ridge lines, like, and he's pushing this big PKM, which is an Eastern Bloc belt-fed machine gun that's shooting a 7.62 long at you.
The Kalashnikov machine gun, yeah, for the audience.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a serious gun.
7.62 caliber.
Yeah, and 7.62 by 54, which is the big Eastern Bloc weapon.
Yeah. Those are massive rounds that pulverize concrete, as we both know.
Yeah, yes, and as I'm about to find out. So he's pushing this gun out into a piece of flat rock, and so we shoot at him with a 300 Win Mag sniper rifle. Now he's 1,200 yards away. There is a really high wind blowing, probably like 15, 20 miles an hour, and we miss him by like 8 inches. And then he pulls the gun back to wherever he's hiding, and we can't tell what he's hiding in. It's a cave or behind some boulders or something like that. And so 20 minutes later, he comes back out and tries again. And we shoot at him again and we miss. So we're playing this game with him for like the next hour and a half. And as this is going on, it's starting to get hot. And the first lazy, complacent thing we did, aside from not having a different plan to fill up sandbags, was our helmets came off.
Right.
Because we were hot. And then our body armor comes off. Now think of this. We're shooting at a guy with a machine gun, and we think it's okay to take off our body armor and helmets.
Right.
It's just like a complete lack of humility. That's arrogance. That's complacency at its apex. So I think it was around 11 a.m. They did a coordinated attack, and what we didn't know was that guy pushing his PKM out on that piece of flat ground, that was happening in at least 5 different positions on 2 ridge lines, completely surrounding us.
Right.
Not to mention the other guys that were creeping up close to our buildings that we were holding
Right.
in the village. So coordinated attack, we get hit with an absolute hailstorm of rock and then a steady stream of PKM fire. And they're going off all around, RPGs blowing up all around our compound up there. And then also down below us in the compounds that the guys are holding. And so I'm laying on my belly, and luckily I wind up being right where I took off my body armor and helmet where this happened. So snake my way back in my body armor, get my helmet back on my head. I'm looking up at that rock wall we built, and I'm watching the rock physically starting to erode under the impacts of that steady stream of that PKM fire.
The bullets which keep destroying those rocks around. Yeah.
They're chewing the rock up. And so I grab for my rifle and I'm coming up to shoot back. And I'll tell you what, I would no sooner put my face into a table saw than I was going to put my head up over that wall to shoot back.
Because of the intensity of that vicious fire that's coming down on you. And it's not just the bullets, but again, the fragmentation from all that, granite rock, surrounding you. It's just incredible. Yeah.
And in that moment, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get shot. I'm going to get shot here probably in the next couple minutes. For a little bit, I thought, hey, what's this going to feel like? What's the experience going to feel like? And then I thought, you know what? I'm probably going to die here today. Down below us in the compounds, because we were up on that piece of high ground.
Right.
The guys had been shot out because they could fill sandbags up there. So they built all these nice rooftop fighting positions. But because
they protected at least somewhat, yeah.
They're taking fire from elevated positions. They had to, because they didn't build roof in them. And now the Taliban's close enough to them that they're lobbing grenades over the compound walls. So they had to take their breaching charges and blow holes in the compound walls so that they could see out. And so now the trajectory of the whole gunfight looks like those compounds are going to get overrun, and then we're going to get overrun on this piece of high ground shortly after that. We had one aircraft overhead. It was a Predator, and Predators are UAVs, so there's not a person in it.
Unmanned, yeah. Unmanned aircraft, yeah.
Yep.
The drone.
And they're looking at the battlefield through a thermal image from 30,000 feet. And thermal images are great, except for when it's like over 100 degrees and everybody weighs, is the same temperature as the rocks essentially. And the Taliban, they had all these countermeasures for our thermal imagers, so they would put wet blankets over them and all these different things.
Right.
And they could only pick out 2 of the probably 80 to 100 guys assaulting our position. And they have limited bomb. They had 1 Hellfire missile. They hit those guys with the Hellfire missile. There's 2 other guys out there still. Every aircraft in the country now is coming as fast as it can to our position, because over the radio we'd put out how desperate our situation is. What happened was our SATCOM antenna, which was set up outside of our fighting position, which is another lazy, complacent, stupid thing that we did, got shot in the base and fell over. It lost the link with the satellite, and we lost comms. That's our lifeline. My task unit commander vaulted over that rock wall in that incredible hail of bullets. I don't know how he didn't get shot. It was just like Pulp Fiction. Grabs the SATCOM antenna, comes back inside the wall, resets the antenna up, reestablishes comms, and we get communications reestablished right as 2 French Mirages are checking on station. They're the first jets that made it to us. And our JTAC, our SEAL who's trained to give the aircraft information on where to drop the bombs, he's laying right next to me. And it was his first deployment. He's a really, really sharp guy. And he did something that was really smart. He's like, he couldn't give them any 9-line coordinates because we didn't have specific coordinates on where to drop the bombs yet because our heads were down. So he's like, hey, can you just do a show of force over these 2 main ridge lines? And the pilots on the way there, they had our products, so they knew where the ridge lines were.
Right.
And so what a show of force is that's when our aircraft will fly as low as those aircraft are willing to fly. And it lets the Taliban know that, like, hey, we've got aircraft on station. They hate our aircraft like you would when stuff is bombing you and you can't even see it.
Right.
So the French pilots, when they're ready, they come back over the radio and they go, ho, 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 stand by, here we come.
French, the garages, yeah.
And they come roaring in super low,
altitude,
and
yeah.
they're kicking off flares as they're flying to confuse any heat-seeking missiles that the Taliban might have. And they come over both ridge lines. Well, what does this do? This is the same thing as those bullets stitching the top of the rocks next to me, and this forces the Taliban to all put their heads down.
Right.
Which now there's a lull in the firefight. Now I can get my head up. Everybody else has got their head up. Our machine gunners, our snipers, our mortarmen are just pumping out ammunition as fast as we can in the general direction. Now that we're up and looking, we can see the spots on where to shoot, and the fights become something that's more or less even at this point.
Right.
But we're like 35 miles from the near forward operating base, and we don't have an unlimited supply of ammo.
You're running out of bullets. You're running out of
grenades. We're going to run out of
and,
bullets. Yep. And the firefight is roaring on, and then a B-1 bomber checked on station.
Thank God.
So that was the
Thank God. So now we got some real power coming over.
Oh my gosh, the B-1 bomber is a sledgehammer. And I'll tell you what, I got goosebumps right now because I was listening on, because I'm a leader, I'm on 2 channels. I'm listening to two networks, and I was listening to what we call our fires net that's talking to the aircraft. And that pilot, she goes, hey, I'm going to drop 4,000 pounds of ordnance for you. I'm going to give you
female. You said it was
female pilot. So
God
awesome.
Bless. Yeah.
She sounded like an angel. She's like, I'm going to drop 4,000 pounds of ordnance for you. I'm going to give you 8 500-pound bombs, 4 on each ridge line. I'm going to have them air burst 50 meters off the deck, and they're going to be 100 meters apart. So if you can imagine, that's something that's going to lay down a frag pattern that could take out like. And she said it all as coolly and calmly as if she was saying, hey, Jason, I'm going to Starbucks. You want me to get you that latte that I know you like?
You want double, triple mocha frappuccino.
Yeah. And then do it all at the same time. So she goes, weapons release, 30 seconds to impact. And then 10 seconds out over our inter squad net, we get a countdown 10 to 1, and then boom, 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 boom. All these bombs detonate off both these ridge lines. It was incredible. It was like the 4th of July. I mean, if you're thinking of that napalm strike at the beginning of Apocalypse Now, that's what it was like.
That's what it was.
Everybody was cheering.
The sense of jubilation in the team, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Hey, the guys that jumping, thank God.
Except for the Taliban, they didn't cheer because we killed or wounded half the guys that were out there that day. But they were still up there. So we settled the firefight down for that day. But there was still a low taking sporadic small arms fire and the occasional rocket propelled grenade. So at 2 p.m, when we ran out of water at that high ground position, it wasn't safe for us to go down to the compounds where it was 112 degrees out and there was no shade. And
you're dehydrated and you're out of water and you've been in a firefight forever. And the stress, the level of stress, when you're running out of bullets, you're running out of grenades, any kind of, it's just incredible. And as you stated, hey, it's 112, 115 degree heat, and you still have the Kevlar, gear on yourselves, the helmets and the body armor. It's just incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So you look at all those things that went wrong. That was all because of me getting a lack of humility, right? And not really assessing and getting complacent. It was all those mistakes that I made. It was all complacency. We should have had a plan for what we were going to do to make fighting positions if we couldn't fill up sandbags. And boy, we came up with one quick after that. But I should have done that ahead of time. There's no way I should have been going anywhere without 24 hours worth of water. And so all these things, it was a huge life lesson that I learned about complacency. And, you know, later on, I know we're going to talk about this, but how do these lessons that we learned on the battlefield apply to everyday life? And they do, they're directly applicable. It's just that we learn the lessons faster on the battlefield because the results are catastrophic when you show a lack of humility. You know, like Blockbuster Video's got an opportunity to buy Netflix, and they don't
ignored them. They ignored
right?
the danger.
Like,
they didn't recognize the danger, and they were out of business just like that.
Yeah, we're at the top of the game, but that didn't happen overnight. They didn't get burnt immediately. It took years, and so you know, it's like you can't turn an aircraft carrier.
It's like a boiling frog effect. You know, a lot of people probably they can relate to that. You're trying to ignore it. You're being lackadaisical and lazy and ignorant, and a combination of all of the above factors. It does not burn you immediately. You don't get boiled right on the spot, but gradually, you know, you recognize the danger. And by the time you recognize that there is the danger out there, I mean, it's too late for you to jump out. So it's an incredible experience in humility. And most of my audience, along with myself, obviously, they will agree wholeheartedly. It takes a very strong person to recognize his own mistakes, you know, and acknowledge them, recognize them, and be open about them. Speak to the public. Hey, you know, this is where I was dead wrong. It could have cost myself and countless number of my team members their lives. All right, having that domino effect where, you know, one fail, you know, triggers the reaction that this flank is overexposed. You know, there is not enough, you know, firepower because somebody is a casualty and cannot conduct that firefight any longer. It's just an incredible experience, and I sincerely appreciate your sharing with myself and my audience, Jason. So true. But as you and I did like the point you mentioned, the F-1, one of the most sophisticated aircrafts, obviously in the globe, in the world, in the global history. I mean, being operated by a female pilot. I mean, I wish the Taliban that were on the receiving end of all those, you know, guided rockets and bombs and all the ammo that has been distributed so generously by that B-1 bomber, if they knew that it was not just an American fighter, but it was a female. And you can imagine how much, well, you know, because you have been to that part of the world. I mean, the hatred they experience to female U.S. Military personnel. What an incredible experience. I truly believe you should really, I know you're always out of time between your corporate engagements and the family life that you're entitled to enjoy today. But I mean, you definitely should put together a movie. I think it would make a fascinating movie. I mean, this just one episode out of countless number of firefights, you know, multiple deployments that you have been involved with, you know, in multiple theaters of operation, from Somalia to Afghanistan to Iraq, where obviously you've seen some major action in your deployments. That would make an incredible, truly incredible movie, a real blockbuster. But more importantly, it would deliver yet another very powerful message to the American people. Don't ever take your freedom and everything that you're enjoying on a daily basis here in the US for granted. I mean, there is countless number of men and women, brave, you know, great American patriots, real heroes who have been contributing, paying with their blood and a lot of times with their limbs and a lot of times with their lives, you know, just to safeguard those freedoms and allow Americans enjoy their lives. Incredible story. And again, we can go on for hours and weeks, and obviously I'm very apprehensive of your ultra-packed schedule, Master Chief, but I would like you to speak about eventually after 3 decades, 30 years, folks, to our audience, 30 years. A lot of people cannot take stress for an hour, you know, and you're talking about 30 years of dedicated combat service throughout the world, protecting this country and American people. So at some point, obviously, at the 3 decades, you decide, hey, enough is enough. You more than paid your dues. You more than earned your stripes. And as much as you valued the friendship, the camaraderie with your team members, because I know, based on my, multiple communications with all the military personnel, not just in the U.S. On my channel, I had a UK Special Forces gentleman. And speaking about the benefits, again, outside of the U.S. military, those guys, they have to jump through the hoops, getting, medical discharge, benefits. It's a totally different world. And Americans, as you stated, hey, they don't recognize a fraction of great things that America brings to the U.S. military and its people. So yeah, incredible experiences. So at the 3 decades, you decide to, hey, enough is enough. So, thank you, military. And you decide to go back into civil world. And you have been incredibly successful in that world because of your affiliation with Commander Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, the folks that you have been deployed with on multiple occasions, I guess, in your previous team's experiences. And you decided to join a name that becomes now one of the institutions in the corporate training industry, which is the Echelon Front, right? So I would love you to speak about that.
Yeah, so I've known Jocko since 1993. I was deployed to I was at SEAL Team 3 with Jocko and Leif when they were in Task Unit Bruiser. I was just in a different task unit.
Did he get involved? Did he join the Navy at about the same time, Master Chief?
Jocko was, I think, 2 or 3 years behind me joining.
Couple years apart here behind you. So you were the first one here to kind of like pave the path, and then they joined. Yeah.
And we met when he was, first deployment. He was an enlisted guy, and we had a lot in common. Hit it off right away, and have been friends ever since then. And then later in our careers, I was running the land warfare training when he was the officer in charge of our training detachment, and that's it runs all the sustainment training for the West Coast. So right when I promoted into these executive levels of leadership. So here I am, I'm out there doing the job with the guys like I was up here in Afghanistan. And then I promote into the Ops Master Chief and Command Master Chief roles. And now I'm up in the office all day, going to meetings and answering emails. And I was just miserable. And Jocko had just retired. And it wasn't long after that Extreme Ownership came out as a book. And so boom, I had a long commute into work. So I got that book on Audible and digested it right away. And it really came out at the perfect time for me because it helped me with my leadership, because leadership was something I was just doing, but I wasn't really being deliberate about it and I wasn't thinking about it. And so I pointed out a bunch of stuff that I was doing correctly, but more importantly, it was pointing out things I was doing wrong and I could improve on. So that was a great help. A little bit after that, his podcast comes out. And so I started listening to the podcast, which was great because it's a weekly reminder of, being introspective and doing better and looking at other leadership challenges that other leaders have had, mostly in the military, but a bunch of different environments. So it was great. So prior to me retiring, I said, hey man, is there a spot for me with you at Echelon Front? And he said, absolutely. So I retired on like a Wednesday, and the following Friday, I was doing my first gig with Echelon Front as one of their leadership instructors. And it was a fairly easy transition for me to make, because essentially I'd been public speaking for the whole last half of my career, because that's what you do as a senior enlisted guy. And that's what I did as a leadership instructor when I was at the training command. And I'd been completely immersed in these concepts, because I've been living it. I'd taken all this stuff that, that they put out in Extreme Ownership, and I've been putting into practice and seeing it work. And so then what was really interesting to me is now that we in Echelon Front, we say every problem is a leadership problem. Every problem you're having at your organization and is a leadership problem, and we solve problems through leadership. So we help organizations problem solve, get more efficient, make more money, and do better, right? And what kind of surprised me is that I could take the things that we learned in the military and I could see how they translated straight across to like law enforcement or fire more. But I was surprised when I would work with like a software company or a healthcare company or an accounting firm, and I discovered they're essentially having all the same problems that we have in the SEAL teams, and all these things that we talk about that we learned in combat, about being humble is going to help them. About, our first law of combat is cover and move. It's about teamwork and breaking down silos and getting rid of those little friction points that develop between different departments in an organization, that our second law of combat is keeping things simple. And there's lots of companies that they haven't articulated to their people what winning looks like, or have they even thought that through? Maybe they're saying, well, winning looks like we're making good money. Does it? Or does winning look like you got a 5-star customer review? Or does winning look like you get a lot of repeats? Or you never have any product returns, and so it's important to think about that stuff and then communicate it in a simple, clear, concise term to everyone that's on your team that's working for you. Our third law of combat is prioritize and execute. Man, that seems simple. It is not easy. It's not easy to back up and look at everything that's going on in your organization and go, well, wait a minute, this thing I'm focused on right now is not a priority. It can wait. I need to take care of these other things. And then our final law of combat is decentralized command. And decentralized command is the most robust way to run any organization that people have come up with yet. And this is a situation where everybody's leading. And so it takes the first 3 laws of combat, cover and move, simple, prioritize, and execute, overlaid with each other to get to that condition where everybody on your team is leading, and they don't have to come back to you every time and ask you, hey, what do we do now? And what's great about it is you're the most adept to innovate when you're there, because your people closest to the problem are problem solving. And that's who you want solving your problems. If I'm up in an office on the 3rd deck, I am not the person that's going to come up with a solution to a problem that people are dealing with out there on the street. I need them to come up with a problem. Now, clearly, there are parameters that everyone's got to work in, and that's part of my job as a leader to explain to everybody, hey, this stuff's got to be legal, ethical, and safe, and we got to be inside these parameters. All this we developed on the battlefield. And it applies to every aspect of your life, right down to how you run yourself and how you're running your family. And so I tell you, one of the great things about this job is I get to get out, and in post-COVID now I'm traveling a whole bunch. So I'm all around the country, and I'm seeing a broad spectrum of our society. I was down speaking to 150 fire chiefs in Arizona last week. Next week I'll be teaching to some strength and conditioning coaches and a bunch of different professionals. And before that, I was speaking to software people.
Yeah.
This country is full of so many awesome people doing so many awesome things that if you pay attention to the media, or if you're looking at the wrong social media, you may be down on our country right now, and you may think things are going wrong, but I don't see any of that. I know I see the same news reports everybody else sees. I'm not seeing it with my own eyes. I see great people who are working really hard, and that goes down to like young people working super hard, who are coming out with great ideas, who are innovative, who are strong, who are caring, who the second they see one of their neighbors needs help, they're reaching a hand out to help them out. And I just can't tell you how much gratitude I have that I have this opportunity to get out and see it, and see just what a great community we're in the United States. Do we have room for improvement? Yes, we do. We always have room to improvement. That's a part of being humble. We can't just say, hey, everything's good and just quit. No, we got to keep leaning forward to see how we can be inclusive, to see how everyone can kind of fair shake, because everybody has something of value to add to this country. And there you go.
Those are incredible, incredible points you're making, Command Master Chief, and I can't but just wholeheartedly agree with you. In my line of business, I've been fortunate to travel the great American, continent from sea to shining sea, as you're stating. From Arizona to, the Western Northwest, where you're based at, and so true. Look, I mean, nothing is perfect, but as a bulk, the country, the population, the people, they're great, they're talented, they're brilliant professionals. They mean good for this country, and hopefully, again, with God's help and the help of brilliant and great patriots like yourself, who will overcome all those great problems, and we will come out stronger and better than at any point in the past. I mean, the experiences you've been sharing with us are truly life-changing experiences, and I think the corporate world should be extremely fortunate for the people like yourself and your company, Extreme Ownership, because you truly bring your multi-year experiences from the battlefields, deployments all over the world, and you extrapolate them from the military world into the corporate world and personal world. And you show the light of the day to really so many business owners and corporate executives that may be paralyzed. It's paralysis by analysis and what have you. But think about the example that you just shared with us, and compare it against your air conditioning is down, or your telephone lines are not functioning properly, your internet is sporadic, and just again compare it against the experiences that you and your team fellow members had to go through. So I know you're extremely limited as far as your time is concerned. Just a few more minutes before we wrap it up. Any final thoughts that you would like to share with American people? What I'm hearing again from you is extremely positive message. It is rejuvenating. It is really stop complaining, get out, and just contribute. Make a contribution into this country. Make it better and stronger. But again, I would love you to kind of like conclude this fascinating interview and just share with the audience your kind of like final thoughts to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick little like bullet point phrase. I think that is just, if you do this, it's going to make your life easier. And what that is relationships equal mission success. And so you need to take the time now to develop these relationships across the board with everybody that you meet, because I want you to think about this. If somebody considers you a friend, they will take risk for you. If somebody considers you a friend, they will keep their department or office open the extra 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes to get you what you need. If somebody considers you a friend, they're going to take your cell phone call during your dinner. And so if you approach life from a humble aspect, and maybe there's another department at your organization and you're frustrated with them, and you're like, well, they don't work hard, or they've screwed us over again. Back up, start of it like, hey, what can I do to help them? And go over and start developing relationships with those people. And I think you're going to find that that's going to really grease the skids. It's going to make everything just function a lot better for you. And that's across the board. I watched this. Here's I'm going to tell another little sea story here about the relationship.
Please, thing. Yeah, would love to hear.
So when I was deployed in 1995, and this is just prior to me going into Somalia, I was the SEAL teams we used to deploy on ships. We would do what's called an amphibious readiness group, and so we would be deployed on an amphibious. We called them Gator freighters, but we deployed on these ships. And when you're a SEAL deployed on a ship, you don't stand any watches. All we're doing is our own thing, and we're just sleep, eat, and lift weights, basically, is what they say SEAL stands for. And you're also kind of a celebrity because we're
love the
Navy.
acronym. Love the acronym. That's what makes you so fit.
Yeah. And so we're kind of celebrities on the ship because the Navy Special Forces. So the folks on the ship are looking up to us. And some of the guys let that go to their head a little bit, and then they would be condescending or not cool to anybody on the ship and didn't talk to them because they thought they were better, which is just like, that's the opposite of humility, right? Sure. Well, my leading petty officer, and that's the first guy that was my official chain of command in that platoon,
right,
was this guy Monty Treesize. And Monty Treesize, the guy had a lot of life experience. He'd been at SEAL Team 6. He had broken service, and he was at Los Angeles Police Department for a while, and actually, had been in some firefights there and then come back in. And so I respected the heck out of him. And because he was my leader, I watched him all the time. And I watched how he behaved on the ship. And when Monty went through the chow line on the ship, the serving line there, he knew everybody that was serving the food and would be laughing and joking with them. And then the kitchen is right behind the chow line, and he knew the guys back there, and he'd be like, "Hey, Sam, how's it going?" Yeah. The chow line. And then when he walked around the ship, he knew everybody, and everybody knew him, and he liked them. And you know what else I noticed? I noticed that when Monty went through that chow line, he got the best food and more of it. And when the air conditioning broke on that ship, and we were right by the equator because we were right next to the Somalia there off the coast of it, somebody from engineering came down to our space and they wired a fan up onto his rack, and it's like these bunks that we slept in. And it was, we were below the water line living in this space, and it was horrible. It was hot. There was no air conditioning, and this guy wires a fan up there for him. Yeah. And when I saw that, I was like, "Monty, how do you get all this stuff done?" And he goes, "Jason, wherever you go, run for mayor." And he didn't mean it in a creepy, duplicitous way. He meant it in the way it's like, "Hey, just be good to everybody. Be good to everybody, even if you don't think that you can get something back from them. And your life will be so much easier." And so I started putting that into practice as my career developed, and I watched, like, hey, this works. When I've taken the time to know the supply chief's name in supply and be friends with them and find out where we got that common ground, and I need new gear, I'm always getting the new gear, and I'm getting the new gear first. And when I know that admin chief who's up in the air-conditioned spaces at the SEAL teams, and everybody resents them because they're never out in the field, but I know them, and I know how many kids they got, and I know that we like the same movies, guess what? My pay problems, first of all, I don't ever have any pay problems. And if I did, they would get fixed right away. And so it comes down to relationships. And you got to develop them with everybody. And you develop relationships by finding out where you got that common ground and treating everyone with respect. And so as I close out, I want everybody to think of this. I want you to think of the concept of kindness. I want you to treat yourself with kindness, treat others with kindness, and treat the planet with kindness. Because to be kind when someone is aggravated and maybe annoyed, that takes the greatest strength. It does. It takes the greatest strength to return a frown with a smile. And you're putting a lot of positive energy out there. And when you do that, your life is just going to be better. So that's how you should roll. Be kind. Thanks so much for having me, Gene. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, Command Master Chief Jason Gardner, God bless you. I can't stress enough my appreciation to yourself. Again, it is for the audience who hopefully has been enjoying this incredible conversation. Your absolutely incredible experiences, of deployments, your military, and over the last 3 years, your very successful corporate life. Thank you so very much for coming on. Again, God bless you. God bless your family, your SEAL team members, and to our audience, I do hope you loved every second just as much as I enjoyed. How can the people get in touch with you? I keep, ever since I met Lieutenant Commander Leif Babin at that event I mentioned to you about 3 years back, I got his autographed copy of Extreme Ownership. Again, Echelon Front is an incredible, incredible institution. I think every corporate executive, every business owner should get in touch with you folks and learn, again, from the incredible experiences that you can share and see the value you bring to the table. So how can the folks get in touch with you, sir?
So they can go to Echelon Front, ECHELON front.com. And they can look at, hiring us to come do a speech or a workshop. We also have virtual learning space, which is the Extreme Ownership Academy, where if it, financially it's something that you can't set up to have us come speak, you can interact with us on. There are great foundational forces that reinforce the teachings of this book. And we have live Zoom meetings 3 days a week where you can actually interact with Jocko and Leif and the rest of the staff and ask questions. So that's great. And then you can follow me on Instagram at jason.n.gardner. And I just talk about, all the joys I've got of being a father and a husband and living out here in the woods where we live.
Well, again, I'm going to post all the information for the folks who would want to contact, and I would imagine that everyone who is going to watch this fascinating interview would want to learn more about the Echelon Front and the incredible value that you bring to those who sign up for the program. But again, Command Master Chief Jason Gardner, God bless you, sir, and best wishes. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Gene.
Thank you so much.